Hi, Assalamu alaikum. This is Kalia Griffin, and today I'll be talking about uh, a few things. I want to take this ultimately towards highlighting, showing you how the incarnation doctrines and the philosophy of religion are logically incoherent, whereas the prophetic doctrines uh, can logically be reconciled with, rather they make more sense. Uh, Before that, I'll have to discuss a few things lay people might not be aware of. So, let's begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God. Around us in the universe, there are objects, there are different kinds of entities. We know all these entities are contingent slash dependent upon other objects or entities in order for them to exist, in order to come into existence. For example, a plant. A plant performs photosynthesis using the energy coming from the light of the sun in order to convert it into chemical energy used to produce oxygen, etc. Without the sun, the plant couldn't come into existence and would not exist, would not continue existing. Uh, you guys could argue saying there could be artificial growing lights, etc., etc. But again, those are other objects slash entities upon which the plant is dependent upon to come into existence in the first place. Similarly, every single thing we observe around us in the whole universe is contingent upon another object for its existence, another causer that would bring it into existence. The plant is contingent upon the sun. A piece of wooden furniture would be contingent upon the piece of wood that wouldn't come without a tree, that wouldn't come without the sun. Or even if you have a piece of wood, it couldn't just transform itself into wooden furniture without a carpenter. Similarly, water as an element is dependent upon the oxygen molecule in order for it to exist. So if you don't have the oxygen atom, you wouldn't have water. So what we establish here is objects any object is contingent upon something else, another object that is separate to it or external to it in order for it to come into existence. Now, I have highlighted these three keywords. Why? I'm trying to highlight here that any object requires another object that is separate to it, that is not a part of it, and that is external to it, that is outside it, and that is not itself. Why? Imagine you have a cup. How do cups come into existence? Cups are made from uh, pieces of marble that potters shape into certain structures and they come into existence. That is how they begin to exist. That is how they are made. If you remove the structure of it, the composition of it, that is the marble or the porcelain, if you remove the causal agent, that is the potter, the cup, in order to exist, if you're assuming that it creates itself, for the cup to come into existence, even before it exists, it would have to exist before it exists in order to cause itself to come into existence. Any object, for it to exist, it would have to exist before it existed and cause itself to come into existence. Mental gymnastics. So, the premise we establish here is any object, any object is contingent upon something else, another object that is separate to it and that is external to it in order to cause it to come into existence. This is premise 1, P1. Uh, Coming on to the next thing we're going to discuss, you have the creator, the causal agent, and you have the creation. From P1, we have established that the creator necessarily, physically or materially, transcends the creation. It is outside of it, it is separate from it. A painter cannot make a painting while being a part of that painting. Similarly, a video game developer cannot create the game he is inside. Very simple. It would have to transcend it, have to exist prior to it, not temporally but causally, in order to bring it into existence. Now, we're going to discuss, we basically discussed contingency. We know that different objects are contingent upon different things in order for them to exist and be defined as those certain things. For example, what is a cup? We are discussing this teleologically. A cup is made up of a structure, it is made up of a composition, and it has a purpose. Any of these things lacking, it wouldn't classify as a cup. This definition qualifies, these parameters qualify for any object and every object that we give a definition to. That makes it that object. So, a painting here has certain limitations, certain constraints. It is on a canvas, it is constrained to the paint, it is constrained to temperature, etc. etc. Similarly, a video game. A video game is constrained to certain constraints like electricity, the 2D fabric of reality, that is basically a display inside of the screen that is two-dimensional. It is constrained upon the code, the game, the world, the characters inside it. They are constrained upon the code that the programmer programs it to. Any of these constraints fall, the game ceases to exist. It couldn't come into existence, nor could it sustain it itself into continuing to exist. So, electricity goes off. So, if electricity ceases to exist, or assuming there's a problem with the battery, and there is no electricity, there is no current, the game will stop existing. The characters will suddenly stop existing. If there's a problem with the code, there will be an error and the game will crash. It will stop existing. It won't sustain itself to continue to exist. So every single one of these objects that we see around us, every single of these creations has certain constraints / limitations to which it is contingent upon, either to come into existence or to continue existing. However, the creator of all these the respective creators of all these respective creations need not be constrained upon the same laws that the creation is bound by. So for example, you have a video game and it's running on electricity. It's running on this certain battery percentage. As soon as the battery is empty, as soon as the electricity goes off, the game crashes. But does anything happen to the creator? Does anything happen to the video game developer? The video game characters inside that open world game, inside that machine, will suddenly stop existing. But the creator won't. His existence is not affected by what happens to the creation. So here we establish the creator of the creation need not be constrained by the laws / constraints / limitations that the creation is affected by or is constrained to. To make this more understandable, consider this POV, a video game developer, that is, who is testing his game. Yeah, he is in a world and he's playing this game. Yeah, This game is his creation is world 2. Okay, and there is another arcade machine. There is another game inside that. So world 1, world 2, and world 3. All of these have constraints. Let us talk about, let us consider one of these constraints: code. If the code in world 3 goes wrong, it doesn't mean that the entire game crashes. It could just be that this certain game, this certain object stops working, ceases to exist. Therefore, this is not contingent upon what this is contingent upon. Similarly, if there is a code with the entire game, if there is a code uh, if this entire game is built upon a code and that goes wrong, this would get affected as well. The entire game would crash and it would stop existing. But does it mean that the video game developer is affected by it? Does he become white noise too? Does he stop existing? Does he crash? No. So the premise we establish here is that the creator need not be affected by the laws and constraints the creation is constrained to or affected by. Now, we see our universe. We see our universe. What is a universe? It is a space-time material universe that contains certain, that is constrained by certain physical laws, that is constrained to laws of physics, laws of mathematics, forces of gravity, that is composed, that has a certain structure, that is composed of a certain composition, being galaxies, stars, planets, fundamentally matter, atoms and electrons. Applying P1 and P2 for a space time material universe, the creator of this creation, of this universe, has to transcend these certain constraints. He is not affected by these certain constraints. And therefore, for a space-time material universe, the creator would have to be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. Timeless basically meaning eternal. He is not before time, but he is without time. He is outside time. And immaterial being not something that is physical or corporeal or made up of matter. Now you can call it this or you can call it God. Now, moving on to what I actually wanted to talk about, something that I really wanted to share, that I understood is you have a God, you have the God. Okay. Now we will let's get something straight. You have let's say you have all of the objects, object 2, object 3, object 4. Okay. As we explained here, the plant is contingent upon the sun. The sun is contingent upon the composition it is made up of. It is contingent upon forces of gravity, and those are contingent upon those atoms, which is contingent upon further substrata. The point is, if you make a chain of contingency, let's say you have object 1 that is contingent upon object 2 for its existence, that is contingent upon object 3, so on towards the nth object. If you don't stop this entire chain at a finite number, what you get is an infinite regress of contingent upon objects that are contingent upon another and another one and another one. So if you have object n, it would be contingent upon another object n plus 1 for its existence according to P1. Therefore, in order to make you understand why this infinite regress fallacy is faulty, imagine a chain of dominoes. Okay? You have a chain of dominoes that extends infinitely. Okay? You're sitting here. This domino tips right in front of you. Okay? Why do we know it tips? We know this certain object, being the plant, it exists, it acts, it brings about another effect. We know this is happening. Consider time. Consider time. You have 1 second ticking. Before that you have another. Before that you have another. Before that you have another. Tends to infinity. Assuming it's been infinity seconds since time has passed. Why is this faulty? Why is this logically absurd? Because when you consider the analogy of the infinite domino chain, where the last domino, the current domino, the current event, or the current unit of time that just ticks around us, that is currently ticking, okay? The chain of dominoes continues. When you go back that chain, since there is an infinite number of dominoes in this chain, for this specific domino to tip, an infinite number of dominoes would have to tip before this. And since there are an infinite number of dominoes preceding this domino, the chain of dominoes tipping one after another would never come to an end. It would never reach here because it would take an infinite number of dominoes to tip. Which is logically absurd because every single second is now occurring, which means the dominoes are tipping. Every event happens. Every object comes to existence, which we are witnessing in front of us, around us. There's only one explanation to it. The chain of dominoes cannot be infinite. There has to be a beginning to it. There has to be a first domino. And this domino is not tipped by any other preceding domino. This is what we call the uncaused causer. And this is the only causer to whom we do not apply P1 to. This is necessary because if you apply P1 to every single thing, including the cause of this universe, then the chain of contingency, the chain of causes would stretch indefinitely and it would never complete, and therefore whatever is right now would never happen, and therefore you would need an uncaused causer, an unmoved mover, in order to start this chain of events, this chain of creation. Now, on to what I was coming on. Now, uh, in the philosophy of religion, you have different religions where God talks in different ways, communicates in different ways. What's the idea of religion? It's when the divine, the creator speaks to his creation, the divine talks to his creation, talks to mankind. That's basically religion. So, taking the analogy we used previously, video game, uh, now, for all we know, for what we know of, the form of the creator, the nature of the creator is not like that of any of his creation. He transcends it, both metaphysically, quote unquote, and is not limited by any of the limitations his creation is constrained by. Okay? Now, in the philosophy of religion, in all these different religions, uh, you have different ways the gods of those religions communicate to their creation by, mankind by. Sometimes, what we see mainly, what we see most of the time, primarily in the major world religions, is either the incarnation doctrine or the prophetic slash messenger doctrine. What this basically is God wants to talk to his creation, God wants to talk to man. In the former, this is your earth, this is man. If God wants to talk to man, he comes upon the earth either in his true form or he takes a form, he incarnates into a certain form. Whereas in the prophetic doctrine, if God wants to talk to man, he sends a messenger. Now, this could be an angel, or this could be another man that he chose as his messenger. Yeah. Now, I could have studied this. There's this argument written by this person called Karkushi, uh, where he made a deductive argument that refutes the possibility of the incarnation of God into a limited form, let's say into the form of a human. Okay? I'll list it out in the description. I'll explain it in another video in case I make another video again. This is the first time I'm trying it. But yeah, he basically shows how it is ontologically impossible for God to change his form and incarnate, taking a lesser human limited form and incarnate. God is immutable, he does not change. But the entire point of this video was me explaining this exact thing and showing why the prophetic doctrine is more logical using a simple analogy. Okay? Consider the video game and the video game developer analogy. Okay? It's true that according to P2, the video game developer is not constrained by any of the laws and limitations and constraints, the video game and the characters inside it are constrained too. Yeah. Now, if the video game wanted to communicate to his creation, how does it do it? Say, for example, he wants to communicate to this character. How does he do it? Is it logically possible for him to incarnate, quote unquote, into another character inside this game and communicate with him without changing his composition, without changing his structure? No, it's not. Or take the example of a painter and a painting. Can the painter, let's say there's a bird inside, can the painter communicate with the painting by changing his structure into an ink blot and transforming into an ink blot and merging with the painting and then communicating with it? No, this would require change. This would definitely require limitation from his side. And God is the unlimited. He is without any flaws. He has certain essential properties like the ones we discussed about him being spaceless, about him being timeless, about him being immaterial. Take for example the property of him being eternal. God cannot change his property of being eternal and or beginningless or the ever living. God cannot die because he exists eternally by virtue of his own existence. God is immutable, he does not change. So, just like how a painter cannot turn himself into a part of a painting and just go inside that painting, and just like how a video game developer cannot change himself into a video game character and go inside that video game and communicate with his creation, just that way God cannot incarnate himself into the form of a human, any anthropomorphic form or a zoomorphic form, an animistic form, and communicate with man. However, the programmer, the developer, can program one of the characters with a certain code and make them communicate with the rest of his creation. A messenger, a prophet. Similarly, the painter cannot himself go inside the painting, but he can just paint a message or paint another creature into the painting in order to communicate with the desired person who is supposed to be communicated with. So, what makes more sense? The incarnation or the prophetic doctrine? Thank you. This was all. I'm sorry I extended the video. This is the first time I'm doing this, speaking about my views without any preparation. Any of your views, your opinions about this, any way you agree with me or disagree with me, any logical flaws in my argument, feel free to share with me. Thank you. May peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum.